Welcome back to the History of Early Western Civilization. This is Professor Allen, and here is Lecture Day 7. So Lecture Day 7, for the most part, is going to be focused on the Peloponnesian War and its heroes, or at least its participants. And we'll also then shift over to another area called Macedonia, or Macedon, and speak about that area as well as one of its kings that we will elaborate on next time. So, let's get started with the background of the Peloponnesian War first. So, if you recall, we had the Persian Wars last time, okay? And that was fought between most of the different Greek city-states allying up, especially Athens and Sparta, two of the most prominent ones, against Persia, when Persia sent a massive army to attack Athens as well as other places before and afterwards multiple times. And as well as heroic deeds by the Spartans and Themistocles of Athens in the navy and stuff like that, all against the Persians. Well, that Persian War is over, or the Persian Wars are over. And in the period after the Persian Wars, as we discussed last time, we said that Athens started to form an alliance with several city-states. Most of these city-states, of course, were along the Ionian coast of Asia Minor, okay? And other ones were basically mostly in the Aegean Sea area, although you do have a couple that are kind of spread out throughout the rest of Greece proper. Well, moving on, this alliance was signed and decided upon at the sacred island of Delos, or Delos, right here in the Aegean Sea. And it was decided that the people of Delos had their large treasury on their island, and that they would keep all the dues for the Delian League. The member states would have to pay dues, or kind of like a fee, to be part of it, but in return, they would receive protection from the others, okay, this kind of alliance. And so, while they were paying the money, the money was being stored on Delos, and hence that was the name of the Delian League, hence why we have the Delian League, named as it is. Most of the powers, of course, are naval powers or maritime powers, okay? Meaning that they rely a lot on their navies to protect them, as well as mostly don't even necessarily have very large armies, but they have a large navy, okay? And so that's going to factor in a lot in this coming war, the Peloponnesian War. We also have Athens, who at this point is the most prominent and powerful of these members of the Delian League. And many people at that time, as well as historians later on, consider this kind of the start of a Athenian empire of sorts, where Athens was really calling the shots for most of the Delian League, and any time that any of the other member states were kind of like, no, we don't agree with this, Athens would kind of flaunt its power and even threaten the others. And from what we can tell from records, that's kind of true. And whether they did it completely overtly or more subtly, we don't know always. It seems to vary. But that many people again consider this Delian League really the Athenian Empire, that Athens is really in charge, and it's really just called the Delian League just as a formality. You might as well just call it, Athens, but we'll be calling it the Delian League for the most part. At this same time, in response, within a few years, okay, Sparta and Corinth, Sparta here and Corinth on the mainland of Greece, kind of decide to form their own league, okay, because the areas in the blue areas, okay, decide that they are going to worry that the Delian League under Athens, or at least the Delian League in general, will exert maybe too much power and would be an unstoppable force if they were to ally up and attack any of the other individual city-states. So the blue areas here form the Peloponnesian League, okay? And they are, of course, led by two main city-states, Sparta, which we've talked about a lot, and Corinth, which we've mentioned, okay? And so they're kind of a league to fight against the other league, or at least protect, their allies on it. Not really fight yet. And in fact, to prevent fighting from actually happening, a peace treaty is signed between the leagues, between the two leagues, where the Delian League and the Peloponnesian League come together and agree, yes, this will end up in if we actually don't have a peace treaty, it would cause a war that would expand all over Greece and all over the Aegean Sea and who knows where else. And so we should make some kind of treaty to stop that from possibly happening. And so in 446, they create a peace treaty, and it's supposed to last for the next 30 years. It's supposed to. But it will only end up lasting 15 years. Okay, it's supposed to last until into the 400 and teens area, minus 30 years, of course. But it only lasts until about 430 or so, which is 15 years. So let's talk a little bit more about the Peloponnesian War's background again. Continuing on with that is, remember, we've already talked about the colonies, but I think it's worth mentioning right now, again, and this same map that you've seen many times, that the colonies are very important and are going to play a factor in this war that's coming up. Kind of a bit of spoiler for you, but the Greek city-states, of course, built colonies all over the Black Sea area, the Aegean Sea area, and the Mediterranean Sea. Only these gray areas were Phoenician ones, so don't worry about those. But all of the other colors, yellow, pink, and green, are all colonies from the Greeks. And remember, the two city-states that I said originally that had the most successful colonies in are actually in separate leagues. Athens had very big success, okay, and created most of the pink ones, or allies of Athens created the pink ones, okay, while those that were of the green colonies, okay, are created by Corinth or Sparta, but mostly Corinth for a lot of them, okay? And so Corinth is part of the Peloponnesian League, and Athens is part of the Delian League. So even the colonies themselves are kind of split evenly between the two sides. And while they're not really part of these leagues, the colonies themselves, these colonies are mostly independent, okay? But they are still very loyal to their original founding polis or city-state. And they'll send supplies constantly, especially food, to that city-state during the war. And this meant that the loyalty during the war of these colonies is going to be towards the founding polis always. And so maybe one of the other side might decide, oh, well, we have to help our help out and attack that colony. And so you would end up actually having fighting between the colonies in this coming war. And so it's going to be, quite a big war, as you can see. The war will actually spread out through the Mediterranean Sea, and there'll be some specific instance that we talk about in that case, okay? Also, at this time, the Greeks were still using hoplite warfare and the phalanx formation. We've already talked exhaustively about the phalanx formation, how they would lock shields together, and they would use their spears, and several, 3 or 4 people behind the front rank, so several, 3 or 4 people per in rows back would be able to also use their spear to stab the enemy, okay? Well, the Greeks are still using that kind of formation, okay, during this war. And so we won't be talking much about that, but just remember the kind of fighting that's going to be going on is of both sides using this kind of warfare, okay? Moving on. So, in 431, the war breaks out, okay? And it breaks out because of over trade disputes between the two leagues, okay? One side says the other side is being unfair regarding trade and is actually stopping one of their member states from being able to trade with the other league, is what basically ends up causing it. So remember, it was supposed to be a 30-year peace from 446 to basically 416. Well, it only lasted 15 years, like I said, and war begins in the year 431. And the war will end, spoiler, in 404. So it's a very long war. It's a 20-something year war. Almost 30-year long war. 20 to 30-year long war. And again, it's between the Delian League, led by Athens, who is the biggest naval power in all of Greece, as well as mostly the world at this time, because mostly the Mediterranean is the world. But it's a really powerful naval power, and the Peloponnesian League, led by Sparta, who is the major land power. So you're going to have basically Sparta wanting to do land battles and Athens wanting to do naval battles with their ships. This kind of meshes badly, right? If you think about it. And so, enter Pericles. Remember Pericles, this guy? He was one of the leaders of Athens at the end of after the Persian Wars, okay? He was the person that got those long walls built between Athens and Piraeus, okay? Here's that little picture right here on this map where the city of Athens had very large walls and they had a road going to the town of Piraeus, which was where Athens kept its ships and could use its port for its ships to give them supplies if Athens was ever attacked. And that all the people of Athens could stay in the city itself and be protected and still get fed by having supplies brought through the port and using the walls to protect them. Okay? Well, Pericles is still around when this war breaks out. He is still one of the leaders of Athens at this time. And he realizes right when Athens and Sparta get into this war, because of the two sides, right, the Delian League and the Peloponnesian League, he asks all of the people over Attica, all over Attica. Attica is the area of land around the city of Athens, okay? He asks all of them to retreat to Athens itself, within the walls, because Sparta immediately, at the beginning of the war, sends an army marching this direction towards Athens. And so he orders all of the people for that entire area around the city to retreat to the city itself. So the population, like, doubles, if not almost triples overnight in the city. Okay? And so they're all protected in the city itself. They've got safety in the city walls. Sparta attacks the city, or tries to attack the city, but they don't have any siege equipment, and they realize they'll lose. And so they just kind of get angry, and they basically order the Athenians to come out and fight them, and the Athenians are like, no, we're not doing that. And because they would lose on a straight-up land battle. They know that the phalanx of the Spartans are so much better than their own soldiers. And so they're like, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to stay in our walls. So Sparta, basically, the army, the hoplites, just walk around the rest of Attica, destroying all the crops, all the olive and grape vineyards all over Attica. And, of course, the aristocrats, the richest people of Athens, get very upset about this because it's their plantations being destroyed and their future crops and everything being destroyed. But again, Pericles is like, no, we need to stay in here for our safety, and when the Spartans get tired and go home, then we'll be able to rebuild Attica, okay, after the war's over. Well, after about a year of basically staying in the city, or after several months of staying within the city, a pandemic of typhus, which is this very, very horrible disease, breaks out in the city of Athens. And Athens is very crowded at this point. They're all in the city of Athens. They're getting supplies through the long walls from Piraeus, from the road, and ships are supplying them. Remember, the Athenian navy is just bringing them supplies during this period. But a pandemic breaks out in the city, and 1/3 of the city's population dies, as well as Pericles himself. Okay? So it is absolutely brutal. Disease whips through the city of Athens. Meanwhile, the Athenian navy is fighting multiple battles against the Spartan navy, which isn't really that big, and its allies of the Peloponnesian League. Okay? And so that continues there. And so with Pericles dying, a new influential leader takes over in Athens. When a man named Cleon, pictured right here, is elected to be the new archon. Okay? He's elected to be the new archon, Cleon. And so Cleon is very influential because he's kind of one of the leaders of the poor people. He understands that, yes, the rich people have a lot of power in Athens, but because Athens is a democracy, he realizes that the poor people have a lot more votes. And so he gets into power that way. Okay? His counterpart on the Peloponnesian side, or the Spartan side, is this man right here from a video game, a picture, because there is no actual picture or statue of Brasidas. His name is Brasidas. There is actually pictures of his crown that he would wear. He was not one of the kings of Sparta, but he was just one of their major military officers. But because he was such a good general, they actually made him a crown out of gold. And it looks like leaves. Okay, and so that's it right there. And so that is just an artistic picture of what he would have looked like, maybe. But I didn't want to just have the crown. Well, anyway, Brasidas is a very influential leader on the Spartan side. And so both of these two are in charge of their respective, basically, not only their city-states of Sparta and Athens, but also kind of in charge of their leagues. Now, the league themselves, the Delian League under Cleon now, and Brasidas is basically speaking for a lot of the Peloponnesian League, influence-wise, both of them. And both of them are major supporters of continuing the war, okay? Both of them want the war continuing and heavily expand the war effort. They make sure that more and more money from both of their countries or city-states are funded into the war effort to continue the war, because both of them want the glory. Cleon is kind of doing it because he realizes the poor people need jobs at times, and what's a better job if they can't go and farm out in Attica, but join the navy or join the army. And so he realizes that gets a lot of support. And Brasidas is just a military officer, and of course Sparta is very heavily militarized, and so they love him for that. And so when he says, let's fight the Athenians and the Delians, everyone's like, yes. And so both, however, are actually killed in the same battle in the year 422, about 7 years after both of them became very prominent, after Pericles' death. So 7 years after Pericles died, both of these gentlemen die in the same battle. And it's a very interesting battle, actually. Brasidas leads an attack on a city, and Cleon decides, okay, well, it's not Athens, it's another city in the Delian League. And Cleon is visiting that city with a bunch of Athenian soldiers, and he says that, well, he'll go out and lead the defense of the city. And so he marches out, and to show how good the Spartan military is, Brasidas leads from the very front of the phalanx. And he and his members of the phalanx kill 600 Athenians during this one battle. 600 Athenians, including Cleon, die. The Spartans, on the other hand, lose 7 people. Not 700, 7. Brasidas, however, is one of those 7, because he was fighting right up in front of the top front of the phalanx. So, yes, many Spartans were doing the fighting, but he is one of only 7 to die, while Cleon is one of 600 to die on the Delian League / Athenian side. With both of them dead in 422, no longer able to promote the war efforts, kind of clearer heads start coming through. People are realizing this war has gone on for almost 10 years now, okay? 431 to 422, so almost 10 years, about 9 years. And so a couple people on both sides start deciding, let's make a peace treaty. And finally in 421, Nicias, this man right here, Nicias of Athens, one of the new Athenian leaders that came to power after Cleon's death, has finally reached a truce with Sparta, with the leaders of Sparta, now that these two are both dead. And it becomes known as the Peace of Nicias, and it is signed in the year 421. Well, obviously, this peace is going to not last. It's called the Peace of Nicias, and it's meant to last for 30 years. And depending on the source, some ancient sources says it's supposed to last 30 years, others say it's supposed to last 50 years. Either way, it only lasts 5 years, less than 5 actually. Okay? And why does it only last less than 5 years? Well, both sides say that they're going to stop fighting, and they say, okay, that's great. This is what we're needing to do. Sparta needs to start rebuilding themselves a little bit because a lot of their navy has been destroyed and their allies are upset. Sparta's army's fine. The Athenian army has been crushed, but their navy has done really, really well. But places like Thessaly and Attica itself have been just ruined by the Spartan army. And so they both want peace. And so they both say that they're not going to fight. But what ends up happening is the Athenians start saying that they will attack any city that is neutral, that is wanting to support Sparta. Because they're a neutral city, it's not violating the peace treaty against the Peloponnesians, between the Delians and the Peloponnesians, because these would be neutral states, neutral city-states. And what ends up happening is in 415 BCE, the island of Melos is suspected of allying with Sparta. Okay, it's a neutral island. And Athens finds out about this suspicion, of this possible alliance with Sparta, whether it's true or not. Athens sends its navy there. And they get to the island of Melos, and they defeat the army there, and then they go through the city streets, and through the streets of the island, throughout the whole island, and they kill every last adult man, and they take every single woman and child into slavery. So every single woman and child is enslaved, and every single adult male, whether they're in the army or not, is killed on the island of Melos by the Athenians. At this point, the Peloponnesian League, led by Sparta, says, whoa, this is going too far, Athens, and thus the peace just is shattered. They go back to war. And so this was in 415 when it started in about 421, 420, so about 5 years, okay? Continuing on, we will talk about the next major hero, or major villain, depending on what side of the war and what time of the war, because he kind of swaps sides, which is a very interesting story, is Alcibiades, this man right here, and we'll talk about him in the next video.